Welcome to another episode of Brian's Brain. I am Brian Redmond. This is the Relationship Rehab. And what I want to talk about today, if you haven't seen the title of the video, is voting and the voting process. So, with everything that's going on in the country right now, with the Biden and Trump voting fraud, is it voting fraud? Is it not voting fraud? Whatever the case may be, and however this thing turns out, we're going to pretty much have to accept it the way that it is, regardless of who candidate wins. But I wanted to take a moment to just give my thoughts about the voting process and what are some of the things that need to be changed. So we can go over the entire voting process probably for the next 10 years, and there can be certain caveats that we need to figure out and certain things that we can say, oh, but what about this and what about that? I wanted to put together something that was actually something that wasn't a long laundry list, but it was actually something that we can put together real quick to say this is where we should start. So when you're talking about, rehabbing certain things, like we're talking about the relationship rehab, if we're going to rehab voting, one of the first things that we need to do is pretty much tear down the voting process down to the framework. I'm talking down to the studs. And with that being said, once we get it to that point, some of the things that I think that we need to stop doing and some of the things that we need to start doing is gonna be pretty much in the demolition process of voting. So I wanted to do this because I wanted to start a conversation about us actually changing our voting process. Now, one of the things that I've always said, and this is something that I've realized since the 2000 Bush Gore thing, and one of the things that we've always talked about, especially being in the North, living in Chicago, um, is that voting is always during the worst months of the year. So one of the things that I would suggest, just right off the bat, if we truly want to have a voting process where people actually will participate, one of the first things that we need to do is put key voting times during the year in favorable weather conditions. I believe that some of the voting times of the year are put strategically for that, so you don't get a large voting turnout. And I think that that's something that should be changed. We are the people. We can vote on that, and we can get our local politicians to actually put in the legislation to actually change those voting times. Why aren't we voting, like, especially for presidential elections? I believe one of the biggest times that we should vote for presidential elections should be around the 4th of July. You talk about the founding of our country, you're talking about Independence Day, all of those wonderful things. What better way to celebrate our democracy than the week of the 4th of July, or that weekend after or something, we actually vote in our next commander in chief. So I think that big, major, when you're talking about your governors, when you're talking about your senators, when you're talking about your presidents, that should be done in July, because in July the weather is nice everywhere. Or do it in June, end of June, beginning of July, or something like that, and you go from there. Now, when the inauguration takes place, I could care less. You can figure that out later. But I believe that should be first and foremost. The weather conditions should be favorable for the entire country. Now, down here in the lovely state of Texas, we don't have that problem. But I know that in places like Michigan, places like Chicago, places like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, all of those different places, that weather isn't always favorable in February or in November for people to vote. And when you're talking about getting people out, getting the elderly out, I think it should be. So that would be one of the first things that I would talk about, is changing the actual voting date. We need to vote when the conditions are favorable for the entire country. So we're talking between the months of probably May and August somewhere. So that's first. Next would probably be, how long do we vote? How long should you be able to vote? In my opinion, I would say you should get 40 days to vote. And I'm going to tell you why later on, why you should get 40 days. But you should have 40 days to actually get out and vote. The voting process should begin from that first day and it should end on that 40th day across the country. It should not be where certain states count their votes on this day and we don't start counting votes until that day. Nope. When you vote, your vote is cast and your vote is posted right then and there. That's how it should be. Once you go and place your vote, it's not we gonna put your vote in, put your ballot in, but we don't count that until 6 weeks later, or we don't count it until the last day. No, count it then, because those people that are working in those polling places, they should be able to do it. So why did you pick 40 days? Well, hell, if it took 40 days or 40 years for Moses to get to the to get to the promised land, it should take us 40 days to get to our promised land. If it if it if we were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule, then hey, maybe in 40 days we can get our 40 acres and a mule and have the person in office that we want to have in office. But I really just picked 40 because I thought about I thought about 30 days for the voting process and then that month, but I figured you should have at least, a good maybe 8 to 10 days included in that, in case there are any hiccups, in case something goes wrong. You have a power outage, you have a flood, you have a thunderstorm or something like that, and there's some type of issue. It would take the country or that area at least maybe 8, no more than 10 days to get back on its feet. So you would roughly have at least 30 days fully to actually go and vote. So that would be my thing. The other thing with those 40 days, those would not just be 40 work week days. I'm talking 40 days, Saturdays and Sundays. Yes, you can go vote. So grandmama going to church, granddaddy going to sing at Bible study. He got to do devotion at church. After he does devotion at church, I love the Lord. After he do all that, take granddaddy right on to the polls right before you go to church's chicken. Hey, granddaddy, I know you're hungry. Well, no, take him to church's chicken first because he might have the sugar and he might need to eat so he can get his, so he can go ahead and get him some food for his sugar get out of control. But after he eat his church's chicken, before you go home, go to the poll, let him cast his vote. That's what you do. That's why you should have 40 days. The other thing too is that the voting guidelines, that is something that needs to be federal. It needs to be federal guidelines across the board. States, this is one of those instances where states should not decide what's best for their voters. No, 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 no. If you voting for a federal politician, a politician that is going to be in the federal government, controlling the federal government, then you vote by the federal government guidelines. So you make these guidelines to where, hey, here's what you have to do here. It shouldn't be, well, in Minnesota, we do this for our elections, and then we have this in place for that. Nope. Here is the federal guidelines for all states to adhere to vote. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The other thing is too, with those guidelines, no matter what state you're in, what state you're from, when you go to this state, the voting rules is the same. You go to that state, the voting rules are the same. All of your requirements to vote, all of the things as far as the polling judges, electoral judges, and the poll watchers, all of that stuff is universal. So there is no, well, we do it different here in Minnesota, we do it different here in Arizona, we do it different here in Nebraska. Well, over in the Dakotas, we do. Nope. Eliminate all of that. Universal across the board. Just like concealed carry permits should be. That's a whole nother story. That's my Pro 2A coming out. But the next thing too is, as far as, because one of the problems that you have is local law enforcement. I believe that the FBI, the U.S. Treasury, U.S. Marshals, Homeland Security, all of these law enforcement agencies that are federal agents, they need to put together a task force that goes out, and those people are the law enforcement officers for this process. A U.S. Marshal can go anywhere. U.S. They can go. They got jurisdiction all over. Homeland Security, jurisdiction all over. The FBI, jurisdiction all over. You talking about maybe 60 days that you would probably need to have these guys to get together to plan on what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and to go out and oversee pretty much the enforcement pieces of this election. Therefore, if you have a problem at a polling place, you're not calling the local sheriff who could be in on the BS. You're not calling the local captain to come down there and give you some runaround. Nope. You have a federal agent that will come, that knows the law, knows how it goes, and would have jurisdiction in that area over that particular thing. That's how it should be. So therefore, you have, when somebody does color outside the lines, if you will, or if they do want to block poll watchers, if they do want to exclude people from the voting process, or if they want to tell people they can and can't do this, and there's an argument, you don't have some fake police officers there, or you don't have some local police officers there who may be in with the game. Nope, you got federal agents that show up. Hey, here's what's happening. We got jurisdiction. Get out the way, homie. Before you go to jail. That's what you do. And like I said, those agents would be responsible for escorting ballots that need to go get counted, whatever the case may be. If there's any type of security issue, there is a particular task force that is available. You're talking about these agents are across the nation that can oversee and can act in this instance during this voting time. And I think that makes sense. The other thing too is, I said the one voting method with the exact, well, that's different. There should be one voting method with the exact same tools for every polling place. So if it's something that's electronic, if it's something that is manual, if it's writing, however that goes, everybody should be using the same exact tools. Just like how everybody fills out the same 1040 EZ or the 1040A income tax form, everybody should be filling out this particular voting method. You should be voting all the same way using the same machine. I do not think, and I think it's unethical, and I think it's a conflict of interest for any political candidate, any political employee, any politician to have any type of financial stake, or their first, your immediate family have any type of stake in any type of voting equipment, voting software, and all of that. So this whole thing with the Dominion being owned by the Clintons or the Dominion being owned by the Pelosi's, they got stakes in it, they invested in it, can't do it. Cannot do it. It's illegal. It should be illegal to do that. You as a politician, if you got stock in a company, you want to be a senator, you got stock in a company, you want to be the majority house leader, whatever you want to be, you need to sell your stock. Your husband needs to sell his stock. Whatever, if your husband is the CEO of some voting software, y'all in love and y'all gonna get married, then hey, you need to resign and step down. Both of y'all can't have y'all hands in the pot. That is a conflict of interest. Just like how they have it to where the president and the Supreme Court can't hang out, can't talk and chit chat and do all this kind of stuff and meet up. The reason why they have that, because they don't want no fuzzy lines. Yep, I don't want no fuzzy lines whatsoever. It should be the same way. There should be no way possible that a political candidate or a politician that is serving in office actually has ties, whether it's by their immediate family or their spouse or significant other, whatever the case may be, to voting software. Period. Point blank. That's it. Voter registration. Voter registration should be, and this is why I'm saying this to get to my doozy here. Voter registration should be tied to your driver's license, your state ID, or your passport. These three pieces of identification require a photograph. So when you get your license and you get your driver's license, that's part of your voter registration information is on that license. Or if you have a state ID, if you're too old to drive, or if you don't have a vehicle, or you're on DUI, you can still get a state ID. So you have that. Your voter information and your voter registration is tied to that. Period. Your passport should be something that you have to submit. You gotta bring two of those. You either gotta have your state ID and your driver's license, or your state ID and your passport, or your state ID and your driver's license. You gotta have photo ID with that when you come to vote. When your license changes, when you go to a different state, your voter registration would change too. Aha. Aha. So if you move from Chicago to Michigan, once I get my Michigan license, now if I got my Chicago license, fine. If I'm living in Michigan but still got my Chicago license, I can't vote in Michigan. I gotta vote in Chicago. If I want to vote in Michigan, I need to get a Michigan's driver's license or a Michigan state ID. Once I do that, I now then have to have my voter registration changed because it's in that database. That way, you don't have dead people voting. That way, you don't have people voting in two different states because everybody's getting mail-in ballots. It eliminates that. You can have these people say, and I'm sure that there's some other way that you can try to finagle it, but this will drastically minimize the area for fault and for fraud. Having those three pieces of ID be involved, you got to have one of those two. Got to be photo ID, or you can bring your social security card. That would be cool too, or your birth certificate. And it has to be an original birth certificate. Can't be a copy. Gotta have the one that got the little stamp on it with the little seal and all that kind of stuff. Gotta be a real one. All right. The next thing, no mail-in ballots. And this is a big one. This is a big one here. No mail-in ballots. Well, what about COVID? Sorry. If you want to participate in our democracy, if you want your vote to count, at some point within 40 days, you should be able to make it to the polling place. If you scared of COVID, I suggest you go on day one to go vote. Because it's not the last day. You know how people love to wait till the last minute. This way, 40 days to vote, plenty of time to get to the polling place. If you're sick, if you don't feel good, you got a headache, you got a migraine, you got the sugar, you got hypertension, you got high blood pressure, whatever the case may be, get to the polling place. If you can't drive, get your grandson, get your nephew, get your daughter, get your cousin. Somebody can drive Meemaw, somebody can drive Pop down to the polling place within 40 days to vote. If they can't, sorry. I get it, but if you can make it to Piggly Wiggly, if you can make it out to the Walmart, if you can make it to the Rite Aid, if you can get yourself over to Dollar General, if you can get yourself over to all these other places, your Safeways, you can get to every other store, you can get to dialysis, you should be able to get to the polling place. Plain and simple. And if you can't, as unfortunate as that is, it's no reason to even worry. Don't worry about voting, because you probably ain't gonna be here too long no way. That's all I'm saying. I'm just being real. The reason why I say that is the mail-in ballot process, there is no control over it. There is no control over it, and it's too many areas for problems. The ballots could be invalid. The ballots could be misprinted. The ballots don't scan properly. The ballots are printed on old paper. The ballots are, it's too many issues the signature ain't clear enough. I don't see the person's name on there. Their first name ain't on there with their last name. They got a hyphenated name now, and that ain't on the ballot. The ballot was mailed in and they signed it Smith Jones, but actually we sent it out as just Smith, so we don't know who it is. And now the Republicans or the Democrat, they want to contest the ballot. We ain't got to worry about none of that. You ain't got to worry about nobody delivering no ballots in the still of the night. You ain't got to worry about nobody bringing in ballots. All these was on my kitchen counter, and I was making my gumbo, and I forgot to bring them down here, and I'm bringing them down here now, 2 days later. You ain't got to worry about none of that. Now people will ask, what about our soldiers over in Iraq? What about our soldiers over in such and such? In 40 days, our government should be able to have that voting process established over there for those soldiers to vote. Plain and simple. All you need to do is have the same machines that you're going to use here, take them over there, get those soldiers to vote. Come on, y'all got 40 days to do it. It's that simple. So it's like when you're talking about saying, well, we got to get all this stuff together, this is a good place to start. You have to have that 40-day time frame to allow for issues, to allow for failures of machines not working and all that kind of stuff. You got that. Because the voting process would essentially take about 60 days, essentially. When you're talking about the delivery and the setup of all those machines at all of these polling places, when you're talking about making sure that there's the law enforcement, that they have a task force in place to be able to just address these type of issues that may occur, you're talking about 2 months to get it all together. And then as the votes are being cast, the votes are counted. So even the people in the country, you can see those totals. It'll be on a website, whatever the case may be. You can see who's voting in your area. You can see who's winning, so you ain't got to worry about who leading in the poll. I can see it right here. I can see it right here. So when you have any type of abnormality, if you have any type of issue where you have 200,000 people go and vote on a Thursday, you can actually see camera footage to see, well, damn, wasn't there a line at this polling place? No, it wasn't. How did they vote? You can monitor that. There's plenty of places, plenty of polling places have recording, video recording where you can at least see traffic. Not to say you can record people actually casting their vote, but you can actually see traffic. So that's another way. Now this last one, this was one that my brother Tommy Sotomayor thought about. He said, I don't know where he got it from or if he came up with it himself, but it was an excellent idea. And that's why I'm putting it in here. The Electoral College, the electoral votes should be split by the vote percentage by that candidate in each state. So if your state has 100 electoral votes, okay, if candidate A gets out of that, oh, well, here, let's start over. Your state has 100 votes, 100 electoral votes. Your population in that state is 1 million people. If 500,000 people vote for this candidate and the other 500,000 vote for that candidate, they split those electoral votes. Y'all get 50 over here, you get 50 over there. If it's 60-40, if it's 70-30, whatever it is, you split it. And that vote is rounded up to the nearest whole number. That's how you do that. So when you counting in those votes, if a certain state got 20 and I get, if a certain state got 10 votes and I get 60% of the vote and my candidate, my opponent gets 40% of the vote, I get 6 electoral votes, he or she gets 4. That in itself is fair. That is fair. It's not a thing, oh, well, no, you got so many. Nope, I ain't trying to hear all of those other excuses, all those other what ifs. You can play that game till the cows come home. Like I said, we could go over this for 10 years and not have a consensus. This here is a beginning framework. Because, and I'm saying that because when we're talking about this election process, when we're talking about what it is that we're trying to do, all we're trying to do is count the votes. That's it. We want a fair election, regardless of who wins. Because when you have people, or if you have a system that is flawed, or if you have people that have malice intentions, and they are literally trying to be dishonest on purpose, if their intent is to fraud the election, this is why we should be addressing this. Because it's not just about these 4 years with Trump. It's about the next 40 years with our electoral candidates, with our politicians that are running for public office. And if we can't trust this election, if we can't trust the next election, if we can't trust the election after that, then what is the purpose of the process if we know that the process is going to be tainted? if we know that the process at any given point in time could be shifted illegally, if we know that there is such a high potential of someone just cheating for the sake of cheating for their own benefit to get their group in, their guy or their girl in, so that they can go ahead and execute their agenda, what are we being America for? What are these states united for? This is about us and our democracy. This is about us and our country. Yes, we got a lot of opportunities. Yes, we got a lot of things that we need to change and address. Absolutely. But this is still the greatest country on the earth, on the face of the earth. And everybody that's living here, everybody that is here on this soil, you should take pride in that, to the point to where you not only want, you should expect and demand a fair election for every single candidate that's running. Whether it's the president, all the way down to whether it's your precinct captain or your alderman in your neighborhood. You should not have to be concerned or thinking about or worrying about if somebody gonna cheat, if they gonna do something to the ballot, if they not gonna count the ballot, if they gonna put in too many ballots, if they gonna create fake ballots, are they gonna use some software to manipulate the numbers? And you've seen the evidence that is shown, at the very least, there's something wrong. You can argue, I've seen no footage of this. This is just absurd that people are trying to do this. This is not. You can't be an honest person and tell me that there isn't anything to be questioned with this process and how the actual numbers turned out. You can't. So all I'm saying is that we need to start somewhere, which is why I wrote this. We need to start somewhere to actually make the process a little bit more not fault tolerant, but a little bit more variable proof, if you will. Make it a little more solid so that we don't have to worry about this. This process has been going on since 1776, and some of the processes that we're using from back then are still being used now. In the 21st century, with technology being what it is, and no, it ain't got to be all done by electronic or on Facebook or whatever. We don't have to do that. It don't need to be a voting app, but we should have enough technology and enough smart people in this country to be able to get it to where we can make it to where the voting process is not only convenient, a lot easier to do, but it's also honest. That's all I'm saying. No matter what candidate wins, we should all have confidence as Americans that the candidate that does win has won fair and square. Is everything 100% perfect? No, but we should be striving for 99.99% accuracy. Being accurate with a count is extremely important, and it should be something that we should all be concerned about. Not just because your side is in, not just because my side is in, not because you big mad because they side is loot. It should not be about that, because it may be your side next time. It may be my side next time. That's the point. When you see somebody cheating, or when you see somebody doing something that's wrong, it's your obligation to have enough integrity to say, hey, wait a minute. This isn't fair. This isn't right. It was just like I was talking with my friends today before I end this. I was talking with some friends today about this. And I said, if I'm sitting here watching the guy who has the shell game, and I know that he's, the fix is in, and he's cheating people on the bus or on the train or whatever, and he's cheating people, do I wait until he cheats me to say something? Do I wait until he cheats my friend to say something? Or do I wait until he cheats? When I see him cheat the first person, do I say something? I say something then. The minute I see him cheating, I say something, because it's not just about, well, that's them, that's him and his hustle. There's a matter of integrity and honesty that we should all have, especially when it comes to our democracy, that it should be no exception. I hope that this video helps somebody become a better version of themselves. I hope that this video, at the very least, starts the conversation to actually get our voting reform going and get a much better system in place to where we can honestly and truly and wholeheartedly trust our voting process and trust the fact that whoever wins has won fair and square. I am Brian Redmond. This is Brian's Brain. Till next time, people, peace, and I'm out.